Welcome back to Adventure Chuckles, where we explore the stories and journeys shaping our world today. In today's video, we're diving into a topic that's on everyone's mind: why living in the UK has become impossible. With skyrocketing costs, housing shortages, and a healthcare system in crisis, it's no surprise that many people are finding it harder than ever to stay in one of the world's most iconic countries. Stick with us as we break down the reality of living in the UK in 2024 and why this once great nation is facing a crossroads. London skyline at dawn, bustling streets with people hurrying to work. Famous landmarks like Big Ben and the London Eye appear in the distance. London, the heart of the crisis. Living in the UK has become increasingly difficult for many residents, and London, as the epicenter, reveals the gravity of this crisis. The cost of living has reached staggering levels. Rents in London have skyrocketed in recent years. Between 2019 and 2024, the rent for a one-bedroom flat in places like Greenwich rose by 54%, from £531 to £820 per month. This sharp rise in rental prices is not just confined to London. Across the UK, cities like Manchester have also seen substantial increases. In Manchester, rents jumped by 20% in 2023, and by November 2024, the city's rent hikes hit a staggering 133%, forcing many to reconsider their living arrangements. The commuter strain, for many, living close to work is a luxury they simply cannot afford anymore. In Manchester, the average daily commute can exceed 90 minutes, sometimes reaching 3 hours. These long journeys add not only to the financial strain, but also to the physical and mental toll of living in a place where time and energy are in short supply. At the same time, the home ownership dream has become more elusive. With the average rent in London now surpassing £2,000 a month, earning a £76,000 annual income is necessary to comfortably afford even a modest apartment. For those hoping to buy, the required salary to purchase a home is even higher. To afford the average home price in the UK, a first-time buyer needs an income of £60,000, which is roughly double the average salary. The growing divide, the disparity between income and living costs, has led to a social divide. It's becoming nearly impossible for many young people, workers in the public sector, and families to secure affordable housing. In 2024, the Housing Affordability Index in cities like London and Manchester hit its lowest point in decades, pushing the dream of owning property further out of reach. What's more, this increasing unaffordability is not just confined to the capitals. Even smaller towns and cities across the UK are now facing similar problems. Cities like Bristol and Edinburgh have seen rent increases of 10 to 15% in just the last year, with little to no signs of slowing down. Cost of living crisis. It's not just housing that has become a burden. The UK's cost of living crisis is a multifaceted issue, with energy prices spiking by 54% in 2024 alone. For many families, this means cutting back on basics: heating, food, and transportation. The average household now spends more than £4,000 annually on energy, with fuel poverty affecting millions. Inflation, which remains high, is exacerbating these financial strains, making it more difficult for people to manage their everyday expenses. In fact, food prices rose by 13% in the last year, creating an even greater burden for the average household. The reality of living paycheck to paycheck is now a common experience for many UK residents. Those who once relied on their income to cover basic needs are now finding themselves in a position where every penny counts. According to recent surveys, nearly 1 in 5 UK residents has used a food bank in the past year, a stark indicator of the growing divide between the rich and poor in the country. The NHS. Under siege, one of the UK's most cherished institutions, the National Health Service, NHS, has been struggling for years. Staff shortages, long waiting times, and a bloated bureaucracy have caused what was once the pride of Britain to crumble under pressure. In 2024, the NHS saw a 55% increase in strikes due to staff demands for better pay and working conditions. Many doctors, nurses, and support staff now report feeling overworked and underpaid, especially after the grueling demands of the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite all this, the NHS continues to provide vital care, but it's operating in a state of crisis, affecting the quality and speed of service. Health services in crisis. A particularly dire issue in 2024 is the shortage of trained medical personnel. The NHS is currently short of more than 100,000 staff members, including doctors, nurses, and support workers. This shortage has caused longer waiting times, with patients waiting over 18 weeks for routine appointments and treatments. The shortage of staff, combined with wage stagnation, is causing an exodus of NHS workers to countries with more favorable pay and conditions, such as Canada and Australia. In fact, the UK has seen a 17% drop in nurses leaving the NHS in the last 2 years. Government responses. The government's attempts to alleviate the cost of living crisis have been widely criticized. Tax hikes, while meant to fund the NHS and public services, have placed even greater pressure on already struggling households. Similarly, attempts to reduce energy costs, such as price caps, have failed to provide sufficient relief. In 2024, Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister, introduced measures to address housing and cost of living issues. But critics argue that these are mere band-aid solutions to deeper, systemic problems. Whether his promises will lead to real change remains to be seen, but many feel that drastic action is required to prevent further decline. Brexit's long shadow. In addition to internal pressures, the impact of Brexit continues to weigh heavily on the UK. The decision to leave the European Union has had far-reaching consequences, especially in terms of immigration and trade. The UK is now facing a labor shortage, particularly in sectors such as construction, hospitality, and agriculture, where workers from the EU once filled the gap. In 2024, the UK saw a sharp rise in immigration due to a shortage of workers. However, the country's departure from the EU means it no longer has the same free-flowing labor force from European nations, making it increasingly difficult to fill the gaps. This has led to a strain on public services, particularly in cities with higher immigrant populations like London and Birmingham. The impact of a divided society. Britain has always been a nation built on diversity, but in recent years, the social fabric seems to be fraying. Economic disparity has led to rising tensions, with communities becoming polarized. People are increasingly isolated, both economically and politically. In 2024, a new wave of nationalism has started to take hold, with certain political factions pushing for a stricter, more isolated approach to governance. But the UK's global reputation, once synonymous with progressiveness, is now being overshadowed by its inability to cope with these ongoing issues. In cities like Liverpool and Leeds, the once promising economic growth has stagnated, creating a cycle of unemployment, poverty, and desperation. The future. A nation at a crossroads. As we look to the future, it's clear that the UK stands at a crossroads. The question now is whether the government can overcome the challenges of the housing crisis, economic inequality, and the political divide to rebuild a stable society. While Keir Starmer's administration aims to push forward with reforms, many remain skeptical. Brexit continues to shape the UK's identity, and the underlying issues of immigration, healthcare, and housing show no signs of resolution. The UK's dream of prosperity, once rooted in its imperial past, is slowly fading. As millions of people struggle to survive, they wonder, is it possible for the UK to return to its former glory, or has the country crossed a threshold from which there is no return? Thanks for tuning in to Adventure Chuckles and exploring this crucial issue with us. The challenges facing the UK today are undeniable. But the real question is, what's next for the millions of people trying to survive in such a turbulent environment? If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know what you think the future holds for the UK. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.